I was 6 years old when my father threw me off a cliff. Not metaphorically, literally, off an actual cliff, into a jungle, like I was nothing. He called it character building. I called it attempted murder. We can agree to disagree. The last thing I saw before the tree swallowed me whole was his face. Calm, cold, unbothered, like he was throwing out old mail. I never saw him again. After that, at least. Not alive. What he didn't account for, what nobody could have accounted for, was the tiger. Her name was Asha. I gave her the name when I was 8. She never complained about it. She found me days after I fell. I was half dead, soaked, running a fever that should have ended me. She didn't eat me. She sat down next to me and waited. I don't know why. I've thought about it 1,000 times. Tigers don't do that. But she did. By age 7, I was sleeping pressed against her side every single night. Warm, safe, completely feral. By age 10, I had stopped thinking in full sentences and started thinking in smells and sounds and instinct. I grew up in that jungle. 12 full years. No electricity, no school, no people, just Asha, her cubs, and whatever I could catch or find or outrun. Then one morning, men with tranquilizer rifles showed up and ruined everything. They shot Asha, dragged me out screaming, threw me into a black van with tinted windows. I fought them the entire way. Bit one of them. Not proud of it. Actually, I am a little proud of it. Turns out I wasn't just some feral jungle kid. I was Kai Mercer, missing heir to the Mercer Group, $40 billion, one of the largest private empires in the country. All left to me in a will. My father had died 3 months before they found me. Left every single cent to the son he threw off a cliff. The irony was not lost on me, even with my limited understanding of human behavior at the time. So there I was, 22 years old, raised by a tiger, suddenly the owner of half the city. I didn't know what a fork was. I'm serious. Someone had to show me how a fork worked. Let me tell you how the first day went, because it gets worse before it gets better. Much worse. The van doors opened and the smell hit me. First, to clean. Aggressively clean. Like the air itself was lying about something. I found out later it was called air freshener. At the time I thought it was a warning signal. Like when certain flowers smell sweet right before they kill you. The man waiting outside was named Gerald, family attorney, gray suit, extremely polished shoes. He held out his hand and gave me a tight little smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. I looked at his hand, then I looked at his face, then I walked in the opposite direction. I heard him sigh behind me, long and deep, the sigh of a man whose day had just gotten complicated. Murdoch Mercer. Kai, we have been looking for you for 12. I stopped, turned around slowly. He flinched. Most people flinch when I looked at them directly. I found out later it was because I didn't blink enough. Apparently that bothers people. I find it strange that people waste energy blinking so much. But sure, different priorities. Where is the animal? I said. My voice came out rough. Too many years of not using it. Gerald blinked, looked at the men beside him. One of them shifted his weight. Nervous. Good. The tiger has been relocated to a wildlife where, not a question. He understood the difference immediately. Smart man. A sanctuary. She is safe. I give you my word. I held his stare for 3 full seconds. Long enough to make him uncomfortable. Then I got in the car. That was our one. It did not improve quickly. The Mercer mansion had 40 rooms, marble floors, and a fountain in the front courtyard. I tried to drink from the fountain. Someone stopped me. In my defense, it looked exactly like water. The staff lasted about 40 minutes before the fear set in. Not because I did anything threatening. It was the small things. The way I moved. The way I tracked every person who entered a room. The way I would go completely still mid-conversation and tilt my head at something no one else heard. A housekeeper named Rosa dropped an entire tray of glasses when I appeared behind her silently. I didn't hear you come in, she gasped, hand pressed to her chest. I know, I said. She quit on day 3. I felt bad about that. Mostly. The one person who was not scared of me was my cousin Dara Mercer. 20-3. Sharp. Fast. She had been running the company since my father got sick. She expected to inherit everything. Instead, she got me, a feral 22-year-old who crouched on chairs instead of sitting in them. She walked into my room on day 2 and found me asleep on the floor next to the open window. I had dragged the mattress off the bed. The bed was too soft. The floor made sense. She just stared. Then she pulled out a notebook and said, "Okay, we are going to need some ground rules." I sat up, looked at her. Waited 6 months, she said, before the formal handover. I will help you learn how to function out here. I studied her face. No nervousness, no performance, She meant exactly what she was saying. Why? I said, because my uncle threw a child off a cliff and someone in this family should try to fix that. She paused, clicked her pen. Also, you own my salary now, so there's that. She said it like it was obvious. Maybe it was. That was the first time something in my chest did a thing I didn't have a word for yet. Turned out it was almost laughing. I was out of practice. Fine, I said, and I meant it. What followed was the strangest education any human being has probably ever received in all of history. Dara taught me handshakes, eye contact, how to eat with utensils without looking like I was solving a puzzle. She taught me that chairs were not threads and did not require crouching on top of them. That one took 3 weeks. My body kept fixing itself back into a crouch the second I stopped thinking. You're doing it again, she'd say, not even looking up from her laptop. I'd look down, both feet on the seat, knees up, full gargoyle mode. The chair is not going to attack you, she said one afternoon, very patiently. You don't know that, I said. She closed her eyes slowly, took a long breath. Kai. I held out another second. Then I put my feet down. The language was easier than the manners. I taught myself to read years ago from 3 books I found in an abandoned ranger station. Old books, formal words. My vocabulary was strange and uneven. But the hardest part, the thing nobody could really train me on, was reading people. Because here was the thing nobody told me about civilization. People lied constantly, casually, without even thinking about it. Asha never performed an emotion she didn't feel. The jungle never smiled to cover something else up. If something was angry, it looked angry. If something was afraid, it smelled afraid. No gap. No performance. People were completely different. People smiled when they hated you, said yes while planning no. At first, I genuinely could not understand it. It seemed like a massive and unnecessary waste of absolutely everyone's energy. Then I realized I could still smell it. Not literally, or maybe a little literally. My senses tested sharper than average. Dara had a doctor confirm this quietly, but something in me processed the gaps, the micro expressions, the breathing shifts, the eye movements. I couldn't explain how I did it. I just always knew when something didn't match. Within 3 weeks of living in that mansion, I had already figured out 3 important things. First, Gerald the attorney had moved company funds to a private account 6 months before my father died. Second, 2 board members had already met in private specifically to have me declared mentally unfit to inherit the company. Third, the investigator my father hired to find me had located me. Within 18 months of my disappearance, he filed a report. My father paid him, told him to close the case, and left me there for 12 more years. He knew where I was the entire time. He knew, and he chose the jungle over the sun. I sat with that for a long time, alone, in the dark, on my floor next to the open window. Then I folded it up, put it somewhere quiet inside me, and decided what I was going to do with it. On day 23, Dara knocked at 7 and found me already dressed. Shirt, pants, everything. The tie was the problem. I had it completely backwards. I'm aware, I said before she could speak. She crossed the room and fixed it without a word. Her hand smelled like more coffee than usual. Nervous. They're going to try to vote you out today, she said quietly. Marcus Webb and Henry Cho. I know. How do you know? I only figured it out last night. I looked at her in the mirror. Webb visited Cho's office 4 times into weeks. Always evening. Always under 20 minutes. She waited. Short meetings mean the plan is already made. They're only sensing details. And Webb canceled his lunch at the Carlisle yesterday. What does that tell you? He doesn't negotiate on a full stomach. He's expecting a fight today. I straightened my collar. Also, he sweats when he lies. He's been sweating every time he sees me. Dara stared at me for a long moment. You know, she said finally, sometimes I completely forget how strange you are. Is that a problem? She picked up her bag. Today? Absolutely not. The boardroom was on the 42nd floor. Glass walls, long table, 11 chairs, 9 people already seated. I clocked all 9 of them in the 2 seconds it took to cross from the door to my chair at the head of the table. Old habit. Webb was at the far end, 50-something, the kind of confidence that came from decades of being the biggest thing in every room. He nodded at me with a smooth and perfectly practiced smile. I filed it away in the part of my brain that tracked threats. Gerald opened the meeting. Standard language. I had made Dara rehearse it with me 3 times so I'd know exactly when each phrase was supposed to appear. Then Webb cleared his throat. Before we proceed, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. Warm smile around the table. A few people shifted. This part, they had also rehearsed. Kai has been away for a significant period of time, through no fault of his own, of course. A gracious and calculated nod in my direction. but the Mercer Group requires immediate executive function. We owe it to the company and to Kai to consider a managed transition. Henry Cho picked it up perfectly on cue. They practiced the handoff. There are provisions in the charter for exactly. Webb, I said. Both men looked at me. You nominate yourself as interim CEO. That's where the speech ends. Webb's smile stayed perfectly in place, but something shifted behind his eyes the moment I said it, and I caught every bit of it. The $600,000 from the Capital Reserves account, I said, moved to a private holdings company in March, the month before my father's diagnosis went public. I looked at him. That's yours. The room went very quiet, very quickly. Every person at that table stopped breathing for exactly 1 second. Webb's smile was gone. I leaned forward slightly. I didn't grow up in boardrooms. I grew up without electricity. I taught myself to read from 3 books in an abandoned ranger station in the middle of a jungle. I looked around the table slowly. Let each person feel it. But I know what a predator looks like when it's already moving. And I know the best time to deal with that is before it thinks you've noticed. Webb started to speak. Gerald has the documentation, I said, filed with the Financial Oversight Board this morning. Gerald slid a folder across the table without a word. He had been waiting for exactly this moment. Webb and Cho looked at each other once, the look of a plan that had just stopped working. Then they stood up and walked out. 7 board members remained. They looked at me. I looked back. Anything else? I said. A woman at the end of the table, Iris Park, who had said nothing and smelled genuinely curious rather than afraid, leaned forward with her chin in her hand. Where did you get the financial records? She asked. Gerald, I said. Everyone looked at Gerald. Gerald adjusted his collar. Young mister. Mercer asked very specific questions. 12 years ago, the investigator confirmed my location and filed a report, I said. My father paid him and buried it, but investigators keep copies. Iris Park held my stare for a moment, then something shifted in her face. Almost a smile. Welcome back, Mr. Mercer, she said. That was day 23. Webb and Cho filed formal objections. They went nowhere. The funds were recovered. I was confirmed as the sole executive heir to the Mercer Group. $40 billion. Official. I still wasn't entirely sure what to do with that, but I was learning. At night, I still slept on the floor next to the window, still woke before sunrise and listened to the city. The cars dot the distant sounds, the wind moving through the gaps between buildings. I was mapping it, the same way I used to map the jungle at night when everything went quiet. Different terrain, different predators, same logic underneath. Know your ground, know who's watching, know the difference between a test and a real threat, and never let them see you hesitate, not even for a second. I was getting better at all of it. There was one problem. Her name was Sable Voss, journalist, the kind who dressed expensive specifically to look like she didn't. She had been trying to get an interview with me since the story broke. I had declined every request. She hadn't quit. She was standing outside the building when I walked out that evening, recorder in hand, easy smile, the most carefully constructed expression I had seen since Webb's. She was good at this. That made it almost interesting. Murdoch Mercer. She didn't flinch. Sable Voss, Meridian Press. 5 minutes. I looked at her. She looked back, didn't look away first. Most people did. She didn't. No. I said, I have documents, she said, suggesting your father's death wasn't entirely from natural causes. I stopped walking, turned around slowly. She held my eyes, not performing confidence, actually feeling it. There was always a difference. 5 minutes, she said again. Above us somewhere, a hawk cut slow circles against the evening sky. Real hawk, city rooftop nest. I watched it for a second. Thought about the jungle, thought about my father's calm face on that cliff. Then I looked back at her. You have exactly 4 minutes, I said, holding her stare without blinking. Start talking. Right now. Please. Drop a tiger in the comments if you want to know what Sable found. Because whatever it is, it changes everything. Sable didn't waste a single second of those 4 minutes. She pulled out her phone, opened a file, and held it up so I could see the screen clearly. It was a toxicology report. My father's name at the top, a long column of numbers underneath that I didn't fully understand yet, but I could see where certain values had been circled in red. Your father's official cause of death was cardiac arrest, she said. Natural causes, stress, age, years of overwork. That was the story. I looked at the report, then I looked at her face carefully. She wasn't performing this. She believed every single word she was saying. The problem, she continued, is that the private physician who signed the death certificate retired 48 hours after your father died and moved to a house in Portugal. I said nothing. Let her keep going. Cash purchase, she said. No mortgage. The house cost just under $2 million, on a physician's pension. She tilted her head slightly. Does that math work to you? It didn't, and I told her so with exactly 0 words. I've been investigating your father's death for months, she said. The toxicology report you're looking at was obtained through a source inside the hospital. It's not the official one. She swiped to the next page on her phone. Another document appeared. Lab results with a completely different hospital header at the top. Elevated levels of a compound called digoxin, she said, which occurs naturally in certain plants, and which, at the right dose, causes cardiac arrest, and which, at the right dose, causes cardiac arrest that is essentially indistinguishable from the natural kind. The evening traffic moved around us on both sides. Neither of us acknowledged any of it. I kept my eyes on hers. Who? I said. She put her phone away, looked at me steadily. That's what I'm still working on. But the financial trail stars inside the Mercer group. I thought about Webb immediately. The private account, the timing. I'm not going to print anything yet, she said. I'm not here for a headline. I'm here because you're the one person with both the access and the motive to find out what actually happened. She pulled a business card from her jacket and held it out. And because whoever did this, she said, is still inside your company. I looked at the card, then at her face. 3 full seconds. Then I took it. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate, just nodded once and walked away like the conversation was already in the past. I stood there for a moment in the cooling evening air, card between the fingers, watching the hawk above make one more slow circle before it disappeared behind a rooftop. My father had been poisoned. Maybe. Someone inside my company had possibly arranged it. Maybe. And a journalist I had met from minutes ago was the only person who had brought me this information. I filed all 3 of those things away, carefully in order. Then I walked back to the car and told Dara everything. She was quiet for a long time after I finished. Unusually quiet. If this is real, she said finally, then you need to be extremely careful about who you talk to inside the building. She was already pulling up files on her laptop. Webb is the obvious candidate, but obvious doesn't mean correct. I know, I said. She looked at me sideways. You already have a theory. I have 3, I said. Webb is first. Cho is second. The third is someone we haven't considered yet. She turned back to her screen, quiet for another moment. Your father wasn't a good man, Kai. I know that, but he didn't deserve. She stopped, pressed her lips together. No, I said. He didn't. We drove the rest of the way in silence. That night I didn't sleep. I lay on my floor next to the window and stared at the ceiling and thought. In the jungle, when something complicated happened, a shift in territory, a new predator, a change in the herd, you didn't react immediately. You observed. You collected information. You stayed completely still and waited until the picture was full enough, clear enough, to act with real accuracy and 0 wasted motion. Acting too early cost you more than waiting. Every time. I applied the same logic now. I wasn't going to move against anyone based on a journalist's documents and a physician in Portugal. Not yet. What I needed was to get closer to the people who might know something, which meant I needed to start attending the kind of social events that Dara had been gently trying to get me to attend for weeks. I was not enthusiastic about any of this. You want me to go to a party? I said flatly the next morning over breakfast. Dara looked up from her coffee. I want you to attend the Mercer Foundation Gala. It's not a party. It's a formal fundraising event. People standing in a room making sounds at each other. That is technically what social events are. Yes. She slid a printed invitation across the breakfast table. Every major stakeholder in the city will be there, including 3 people currently on my list of potential suspects. I looked at the invitation. Gold text, heavy cardstock, a lot of words saying very little. I don't own anything appropriate to wear, I said. I handled it yesterday. She pointed toward the hallway. Closet. Left side. Black. I went and looked. A suit. Dark, simple, exactly my size. How did you know my measurements? I said from the hallway. I measured you while you were asleep. I came back to the doorway. Looked at her. She met my eyes with complete calm. You sleep very still, Kai. It made the whole thing quite easy, actually. This was the woman I had trusted with my entire reintegration into human civilization. I chose to accept this information and move forward. The gala was for days later. I had spent those for days doing something more useful than suit fittings. I had been reading financial reports, company records, board meeting transcripts going back 6 years. I read every document, every report, every meeting transcript that I was legally entitled to see. Everything I could access. Dara helped me get access to everything I was legally entitled to, which turned out to be a significant amount, and I had called the number on Sable's card. Once. Briefly. She had given me 3 names to look into quietly. People connected to the private physician. 3 names, people who might be positioned to verify the toxicology report from a completely independent second angle. One of those names was also on the guest list for the gala. His name was Thomas Vale, mid-50s, head of a pharmaceutical distribution company that had several long-standing contracts with the Mercer Group. Unremarkable on paper, the kind of comfortable and quiet that belonged specifically to people who had decided long ago not to attract attention. I had read his company's financial history twice. Something was slightly off in the contract renewal dates. Nothing provable yet, just a gap where the logic should have been smooth. Animals moved differently when they were hiding something, stiff in the wrong places. To deliberate, Vale's paper trail moved the same way. The night of the gala arrived. I stood in front of the mirror and the suit Dara had selected and looked at myself for a while. Same face, same eyes. The hair was combed correctly this time without Dara having to remind me. Small victories. You look like a CEO, Dara said from the doorway, arms folded. I look like someone wearing a CEO, I said. For tonight, that is the same thing. That's the same thing. For tonight. She straightened my collar with 2 quick adjustments. Remember, you're not there to confront anyone. You're there to observe and to be seen. Let people come to you. I know how to let prey come to me, I said. She paused. Please don't phrase it like that to anyone else tonight. Noted, the venue was a converted gallery space in the center of the city. High ceilings, warm light, the kind of carefully arranged flowers that cost more than most people's monthly rent. 300 people dressed in the architectural language of wealth. Everything understated, everything precise. I walked in and the room noticed. I could feel it, the shift in attention that moved through a space like a wind change. People turned, some subtly, some not. I had expected to feel out of place. I didn't. The jungle had taught me something useful about rooms like this. When a large predator entered a space, everything else reorganized around it. The only real question was always the same: whether you understood that was happening, or whether it was happening to you. Most people in rooms like this were performing some version of confidence. That was fine. I wasn't performing anything at all. Dara appeared at my elbow within 30 seconds, having materialized from somewhere with 2 glasses of water. Webb is by the east wall, she said quietly. Cho arrived 10 minutes ago and has been watching the entrance since. Vale is near the bar. Don't go to any of them directly. I wasn't going to, I said. I spent the first 40 minutes doing exactly what Dara had suggested, standing, being visible, letting people come to me. And they did. Iris Park arrived early and shook my hand with genuine warmth. 3 other board members followed her lead within the hour. A city official I didn't know introduced himself with the specific energy of someone who had been calculating the right moment to do so for 20 minutes. I was polite, completely attentive. I asked questions and let people finish their full answer before I said anything in response. Dara had taught me this, that people who felt listened to trusted you faster than people who were simply impressed by you. I watched Webb the entire time. He was working the room the way he always worked things. Smooth, unhurried, leaving each conversation with the other person feeling slightly indebted to him. He was good at this, genuinely good at it, the kind of smooth that only came from decades of very deliberate practice in rooms exactly like this one. He had not yet looked directly at me once. That was information. Cho, by contrast, had looked at me for times in the first hour. Each time, when I caught it, he looked away fast. Nervous energy. Cho's energy was entirely different from Webb's perfectly deliberate and controlled calm. Nervous where Webb was settled. Vale hadn't looked at me even once in 90 minutes, which was its own kind of information. Around the 90-minute mark, I moved toward the bar. Not to drink. I had accepted 1 glass of sparkling water and kept it in my hand as a social prop, which Dara had explained was necessary. But because Vale was there, I positioned myself to people away and waited. He noticed me after about a minute. I could see the recognition move through his posture. A slight stiffening. The slight stiffening was the kind of physical adjustment that happened entirely below the level of conscious thought. He turned to leave. Mr. Vale, I said that not loud, just clear. He stopped, turned back, gave me a professional smile. Murdoch Mercer, congratulations on your return. Quite a story. His voice was even. Practiced. Thank you, I said. Your distribution contracts with us go back 11 years. He nodded. Your father was a reliable partner. He was, I said. The renewal in March of last year was unusual, though. Standard contracts run 18 months. That one ran 8. I tilted my head slightly. Any particular reason for the shorter contract window? I asked pleasantly, like I was simply making conversation. Something moved behind his eyes. Very small, very fast. Market conditions, he said. We wanted flexibility, of course, I said pleasantly. I let the silence sit for exactly 2 seconds. I'm planning a full contract review in the next quarter. I look forward to discussing it with you then. He nodded, said something polite, excused himself. I watched him move through the crowd toward the exit, and I noted exactly how fast he walked. Faster than a man with nothing to worry about. Well, Dara said at my elbow. She had appeared again silently, which I appreciated. That was subtle. He is involved, I said quietly, watching the crowd part where Vale had moved through. You got that from one conversation about contract lengths. I got that from the way he moved his left hand when I mentioned March, I said. He pressed his thumb against his ring finger 3 times. Fast. People do that when they're suppressing an immediate and involuntary physical stress response. The body gives it away every time. Dara stared at me. She used to do something similar with her tail when she didn't want to show she'd been startled, I said. Another long pause from Dara. You just compared a pharmaceutical executive to a tiger. The mechanisms are the same, I said. The species is different. She opened her mouth, closed it, decided to let it go. The gala wound down slowly the way these things did, the crowd thinning in gradual waves. Webb finally approached me near the end of the night. I had been waiting for this. He'd been calculating the right moment for 2 hours. Kai. He extended his hand. The smile was back, perfect as ever. I want to apologize for the board meeting. Things got heated. I shook his hand. Did they? He laughed. Easy, confident, fresh start. That's what I'm proposing. Sure, I said. Fresh start. I held his hand 1 second longer than normal before releasing it. Long enough to feel his pulse. It was slightly elevated. He knew I hadn't believed a word. We smiled at each other for a moment in the warm gallery light, to people who both understood exactly what was happening and were both pretending otherwise. Then he excused himself and left. Dara was at my side immediately. What was that? He's testing whether I'm going to come at him directly, I said. He wants to know if I have evidence or just suspicion. And what did you tell him? Nothing, I said, which tells him everything. She thought about that, nodded slowly. We left the gala around 11. The city was cooler now, the streets quieter. Our car was waiting outside. As I got in, my phone buzzed. A known number. I looked at it, waited. Then I answered, Murdoch Mercer. A voice I didn't recognize, male, older. Calm in the particular way that people who had spent a long time being dangerous were calm. My name is not something I'll be sharing tonight, but I have information about your father that you need, and I need something from you in return. I kept my voice completely level. What do you need? Protection, he said. Real protection, not liars. I need to know that if I come forward, I survive it. The city moved past the car windows. Dara was watching my face with sharp, careful eyes. Tell me one thing you know, I said. Something I can verify. A pause. 3 seconds. 4. The physician in Portugal, the voice said. His real name is not the name on the retirement documents. The man whose name is on your father's official death certificate, the voice said quietly, has himself been dead for the past 6 years. The car was very quiet. Meet me, I said. The voice gave me a location, a time. 2 days from now. Then the line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly, looked out the window at the moving city. Kai, Dara said carefully. What was that? I thought about the jungle, about the way certain situations resolve themselves, not through force, not through speed, but through patience and precision and knowing when the right moment had finally arrived. I had spent 12 years learning how to wait without losing focus, how to hold completely still while everything moved around you, and trust that the right opening would come. It was coming now. I could feel it the way I used to feel weather changing. Someone is scared enough to talk, I said. Dara was quiet for a moment. That's good, right? I thought about what it meant, about what kind of person went into hiding with a new identity, about what kind of thing a person would have had to witness in order to need that particular level of ongoing protection. It's good, I said. It also means whoever did this knows they're running out of time. I turned and looked at her directly, which means so are we. I turned and looked out the window. The city moved past in long streaks of light. I was already planning. 2 days passed. I spent them preparing, not the way most people prepare for something dangerous, not with weapons or lawyers or security teams, though Dara insisted on all 3. I prepared the way Asha used to prepare before a hunt, by going completely quiet inside, by removing everything unnecessary and leaving only attention. I read everything I could find on Thomas Vell's company going back 8 years. I read it twice. The gap I had noticed in the contract renewals was not the only one. There were 3 others, small, easy to miss if you weren't looking for a pattern. I was always looking for patterns. I also made 2 phone calls, one to Iris Park, who agreed to meet me for coffee the following week without asking why. One to a forensic accountant Dara trusted completely, who agreed to begin a quiet and careful audit of 6 specific financial accounts. I told no one about the anonymous call, not even Dara. Not yet. Some information was safer in one place until you understood what it meant. The meeting location was a restaurant on the east side of the city. Small, privately owned, the kind of place that didn't take reservations online and didn't have a social media presence. Whoever had called me knew exactly how to pick a location that wouldn't be remembered by anyone. That told me something important. I arrived 12 minutes early and chose a table with a clear sight line to both exits. Old habit, the kind you never actually stop having. A waiter brought water. I thanked him and watched the door. He arrived at exactly the agreed time. That also told me something. Mid-60s, slight build, the kind of face that had once been sharper and was now quietly folded in on itself with the weight of a long decision finally made. He sat down across from me without extending his hand. Smart. Handshakes left traces in the memory of everyone who saw them. He didn't want to be remembered here. Mr. Mercer, he said, low voice, completely even. He sat without fidgeting, which was its own kind of discipline. You didn't give me a name, I said. I won't be giving you one tonight either. He looked at me steadily. What I will give you is enough to take to someone who can do something with it, in exchange for the protection I mentioned. Define protection, I said. He folded his hands on the table. New documentation, a new location, ongoing security for a minimum of 2 years, and a guarantee, in writing, from me personally, that my name never appears in any legal proceeding connected to this matter. I looked at him. You were involved. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of something that was already obvious. He held my eyes. I was the physician, he said, not the one who signed the certificate. I was the one your father actually trusted. His private doctor for 11 years. The restaurant was quiet around us. Soft background sounds. Other occupied tables. Nobody close enough to hear anything that mattered. He came to me 3 months before he died, the man said. He was frightened. Your father was not a man who frightened easily, Mercer. But he was frightened then. Of what? I said. Of someone inside his own company. He paused. Let that settle. He had discovered something, a financial arrangement that had been running for years without his knowledge. Money being moved quietly through subsidiary accounts, then filtered out through third-party vendor contracts that looked completely routine. I thought of Vale immediately. The pharmaceutical distribution contracts, the unusually short renewal windows I had noticed and filed away. He came to me because he trusted me, the man continued, and because he needed someone to know, in case something happened to him. His voice stayed flat and even. Something happened to him. I said nothing. Waited. The compound used was sourced from a legitimate pharmaceutical supply chain, he said. Digoxin, as your journalist friend apparently discovered, but at a concentration that required access to specific formulation equipment. He looked at me directly, the kind of equipment a pharmaceutical distribution company would have. There it was, clean and completely clear, and exactly what I had already suspected from the moment I watched Vale leave the gala. Vale, I said. The man's expression didn't change. The order was placed through a subsidiary, 3 layers removed from anything traceable on the surface. But your father found the original transaction before he died. He had photographed every single document with his personal phone before anything could be moved or made to disappear. I felt something shift in my chest. Very quiet, very certain. Where are the photographs? I said. He gave them to me, the man said, for safekeeping, in the event that he was right about what he feared. He reached into his jacket and produced a sealed envelope thick. He placed it flat on the table between us and kept his hand on it. The protection first, he said. In writing, I looked at the envelope, then at his face. He was afraid. He had been afraid for a long time. I could see it in the way he sat, to still, to controlled, the same overmanaged stillness of an animal that had been cornered for so long it had forgotten how to move naturally. I understood that feeling more than he knew. I pulled out my phone, opened a document, typed 12 sentences. Clean, specific, legally binding language that Dara had helped me prepare for exactly this kind of contingency. Because Dara prepared for everything. I slid the phone across the table. He read it twice, all the way through, both times. Then he looked up. This is enforceable, he said. Sign it and find out. I said, or don't sign it and we both leave with nothing. Another long pause. Then he signed with the pen I handed him. I countersigned, sent a copy to Dara's email with 2 words in the subject line. Keep this. Then I picked up the envelope. Inside were 12 photographs, printed on standard paper, slightly faded, the kind of images produced by an older phone camera and low light. But the documents they showed were clear enough. Transaction records, account numbers, a supply order with a delivery address that matched a Vail subsidiary, and at the bottom of the 4th photograph, a name I hadn't expected. Not web. Not Joe. Someone else entirely. I looked at it for a long moment. You recognize that name, the man said. He was watching my face. I recognize it, I said. The name was Lena Mercer, my father's younger sister. My aunt, the woman who had sent flowers and a handwritten card when news of my return had broken. The woman who had called Dara twice in the first week just to ask, in a warm voice, how I was settling into my new life. I put the photographs back in the envelope, carefully, calmly. She approached Vail. The man said, 18 months ago, the arrangement was already in place before your father found it. She had been quietly diverting significant sums from the company for 4 years, completely undetected until your father found the thread. And when he found out, I said, she couldn't allow him to surface it, he said quietly. The exposure would have destroyed her. Everything she had built inside the company, every alliance, every position, every alliance, every relationship she had spent 15 years carefully building. All of it gone if he talked. I sat with that for a moment. Outside through the restaurant window, the city moved past in its usual indifferent rhythm. Cars, people. Light changing. My father had thrown me off a cliff when I was 6 years old. He had left me in a jungle for 12 years knowing exactly where I was. He was not a good man, but he had been frightened enough to leave evidence with someone he trusted, in case he was right, which meant that somewhere underneath all of it, there had been something that functioned like survival instinct, or maybe something closer to guilt. I didn't know which. I wasn't sure it mattered now. One more question, I said. Webb and Joe, are they connected to this? The man shook his head. Webb saw an opportunity when your father died and your return complicated the succession. That's separate. Opportunism, not conspiracy. He paused. Cho follows whoever currently holds the most power in the room. The man said, give him a clear reason to follow you, and he will. I nodded once. We sat in silence for a moment. The kind of silence that settles after something large has been said and can't be unsaid. What happens now? He said. Now you go where I send you. I said, and you stay there. My people will be in contact within 24 hours. He nodded. Stood, straightened his jacket with the careful movements of a man who had been holding himself together by sheer habit for a very long time. He left without looking back. I sat at the table alone for another few minutes, looking at the envelope. Then I called Dara. She picked up on the second ring. I need you to arrange something, I said. Tell me, she said. She was already typing. I could hear it. Find me everything on Lena Mercer going back 5 years. Financial records, travel records, any communication logs we have legitimate access to. I paused. And get me a meeting with Iris Park. This week. Something completely private. Just the 2 of us at a table somewhere quiet. No staff standing nearby. No audience watching us from any angle. Silence for 2 seconds. Kai, Dara said carefully. How serious is this? I looked at the envelope on the table in front of me. Serious enough that we do it right, I said. No rushing, no mistakes. Understood, she said. Give me 48 hours. I ended the call. Sat there 1 more minute. In the jungle, there was a particular kind of moment that happened before a haunt resolved. After all the patience, all the stillness, all the waiting, the specific moment when everything shifted and what had been invisible for so long became suddenly, completely, and permanently clear. The clearing. That was what Ash's cubs used to call it among themselves when I was learning their sounds. Everything clears. I was in that moment now. I put the envelope carefully inside my jacket pocket, stood up, and left through the side exit without looking back. Walked 3 blocks before I flagged the car, because 3 blocks of open air gave me time to think without walls around me. The night was cool. The city smelled like exhaust and rain coming. I thought about Lena Mercer sending flowers, calling to ask how I was settling in. The careful warmth of someone performing concern with such practiced consistency that it had long since become something like second nature. I had grown up around apex predators. I knew the difference between something resting and something waiting. I should have recognized it sooner. That one was on me, but I recognized it now. Back at the mansion, I found Dara in the study with 3 screens open and a 4th cup of coffee going cold beside her keyboard. She looked up when I came in. I put the envelope on the desk. She opened it, read the photographs in order without speaking. When she got to the fourth one, she stopped, stared at the name for a long moment. Then she set the photographs down very carefully on the desk, looked at me across the room. Your aunt, she said quietly. Yes, I said. She sent you orchids, Dara said. When you came back, white orchids. I remember, because I thought it was a strange choice. Why strange? I said. White orchids are for funerals, she said flatly. In some traditions. We looked at each other across the desk. She thought I wouldn't last. I said. She expected me to fail, to be declared unfit or to walk away or to simply not understand what I had inherited. And instead you walked into a board meeting on day 23 and dismantled Webin for minutes. Dara leaned back in her chair. That must have been alarming for her. She's been quiet since then. I said. No more calls, no more check-ins, because she's reassessing, Dara said, figuring out her next move. I nodded, which means we need to move before she does. Dara was quiet for a moment, turning her pen over and over in her fingers the way she did when she was thinking hard and fast. If we take this to law enforcement directly, she said, it gets loud immediately. She has lawyers, connections, 15 years of relationships inside every institution in this city. Her pen stopped turning. She has enough connections to slow any official process down long enough to damage us significantly in the meantime. Dara's voice was flat. I know, I said. That's not the play. Then what is? I thought about what Ashi used to do when she needed to move something large out of her territory. She didn't chase it. She rerouted it, changed the landscape around the target so gradually, so quietly, that by the time the thing realized what was happening, all the exits were already gone. We build the case completely before we move, I said. Every account, every transaction, every connection between Vale and her operation, until there's nothing left that a lawyer can argue around. That takes time, Dara said. Weeks, I said. Maybe 6. The forensic accountant you recommended, can she handle a project this size quietly? Yes, Dara said without hesitating. Then that starts tomorrow. I picked up the photographs and put them back in the envelope. In the meantime, I'm going to do something that will look, from the outside, like I'm building relationships, meeting people, learning the company. Dara studied me. And what will you actually be doing? The same thing, I said, but paying very close attention to who moves differently when I'm in the room. She almost smiled at that. Almost. There's one more thing, I said. Lena is going to hear about the gala. She probably already has people telling her what I'm doing and who I'm talking to. Almost certainly, Dara said. So I want to meet with her, I said. Lunch.public. Something that looks like a nephew making an effort to connect with family. Dara stared at me for a full 3 seconds. You want to sit across a restaurant table from the person who arranged your father's death. I want to look at her, I said simply. I want to understand how she moves, what she's afraid of, where the gaps are. A long pause. Kai, Dara said. I grew up watching apex predators read each other, I said. This is what I know how to do. She was quiet for another moment. Then she picked up her phone. I'll set up the lunch, she said. This week if possible. Good. I moved toward the door. Kai. I stopped. Be careful, she said. Not the way people said it as a reflex. The way people said it when they actually meant it. I looked back at her. At the desk covered in documents, the cold coffee, the 3 open screens. At the person who had measured me while I was asleep because she needed to make sure I had a suit that fit. I know how to be careful, I said. I spent 12 years learning from one of the most effective hunters alive. She pressed her lips together and looked away. I went upstairs, lay down on the floor next to the open window the way I always did. Let the night air come in. The city made its usual sounds below. Distant, layered, full of information, if you knew how to listen. I listened. Somewhere in the city, Lena Mercer was making plans. Vale was making plans. The forensic accountant was going to start finding things tomorrow that people had tried very hard to hide. 6 weeks, maybe less if we were efficient. I was good at efficient. The jungle didn't give you much room to be anything else. I closed my eyes. I thought about the orchids. White orchids for a nephew she expected to fail. A gesture that was supposed to be a quiet goodbye before I even understood what I was walking into. She had made a mistake. A fundamental one. She had assumed that 12 years in the jungle meant I didn't know how the world worked. What 12 years in the jungle actually meant was that I knew exactly how the world worked. I just knew it in a language most people couldn't read. The city moved outside my window. The air smelled like rain getting closer. I stayed completely still, the way I had learned to stay still before everything finally cleared. And I waited. Still. Quiet. completely ready. The way Asha had taught me, not as weakness, but as the most precise form of preparation that existed. The lunch with Lena Mercer was on a Thursday. Dara had arranged it for a restaurant in the financial district, the kind of place where the lighting was warm and the tables were far apart and nobody looked at anyone else's business directly. I arrived first. I always arrive first. Lena came in 7 minutes late. Not enough to be rude, exactly enough to make a point about who was accommodating whom. She was 61 years old. Elegant the way serious money made people elegant, not flashy, just permanently settled into ease. Elegant in the way that serious money made people elegant, not flashy, not perform, just permanently settled into a kind of ease that came from never having had to question whether she belonged somewhere. She crossed the room toward me with a smile that reached her eyes in all the right ways. I watched every millisecond of it very carefully. It was a good smile, practiced over decades. It reached her eyes in all the right ways and held just long enough to feel genuine without tipping into effort. If I hadn't grown up reading the difference between a predator at rest and a predator preparing, I might have believed it entirely. Kai, she took my hands briefly when she reached the table. Warm grip, exactly the right pressure. I'm so glad you suggested this. Thank you for coming, I said. We sat. A waiter appeared. She ordered mineral water and something small from the menu without looking at it, the way people ordered in places they came to regularly. I ordered the same thing I always ordered when I was somewhere unfamiliar. Whatever was simplest. I wasn't here for the food. You look well, she said. Better than I expected, honestly. Dara told me the transition has been difficult. Dara is generous, I said. It's been interesting. She smiled at that. Your father always said you were going to be something unexpected. Even before. She paused. Let the pause do its worky well. Before you disappeared, before all of it, she let the pause carry what she couldn't bring herself to say out loud or directly. I looked at her. He talked about me, occasionally. Her hands were folded on the table, still relaxed. He didn't talk about much that was personal. You know how he was. I didn't, really, I said. I was 6 when I last saw him. Another pause, just a fraction longer than the first one. Of course, she said softly. I'm sorry. That was thoughtless of me. She said it perfectly. The exact right note of gentle self-correction. No overperformance, just a clean acknowledgement and a pivot. I had spent 3 weeks preparing for this lunch, reading everything I could find about Lena Mercer, the board she sat on, the event she attended, the way she moved through rooms and photographs. She was exceptionally good at what she did. I understood that now in a way that the photographs and documents hadn't fully conveyed. Sitting across from her, I could feel it. The attention she was paying to every word I said, every shift in my expression, every half-second pause. She was reading me the same way I was reading her. We were both being very polite about it. I wanted to ask you something, I said. About the company, about the period before my father died. Her expression stayed completely open, warm, and receptive in exactly the right measure. Of course, she said. Whatever I can help with. There were some unusual contract arrangements in the distribution division, I said. I've been reviewing the records and a few things don't quite line up. I thought you might have some useful context, since you were close to many of those decisions during that period. Her fingers moved, just once. The faintest press of her thumb against her index finger under the edge of the table where she thought I couldn't see it. I saw it. The distribution contracts were largely Gerald's territory, she said smoothly. I had some oversight, but not much direct involvement. What specifically concerns you? The Vale account, I said. The renewal cycles don't match standard company policy. Short windows, terms that gave unusual access to certain formulation facilities. I watched her face precisely as I said Vale's name. Nothing moved. Not a single thing. The control was remarkable, but her breathing changed. Fractionally. Barely perceptible. I had spent 12 years learning to detect the difference between an animal breathing normally and an animal controlling its breathing. She was controlling hers. Vale has been a long-standing partner, she said. I'm sure there were good reasons for any variations in the contract structure. I can certainly ask Gerald to pull the full contract files together if that would be helpful for your ongoing review. That would be wonderful, I said warmly. Thank you. We continued talking. The food arrived. She ate with the ease of someone who was completely comfortable and not thinking about what she had just said. That was the performance, and it was very good. But underneath it, in the tiny physiological signals that people didn't know they were producing, something had shifted the moment I said Vale's name. By the time the lunch ended and we said our warm goodbyes on the pavement outside, I had everything I needed from the conversation. Not evidence. Not yet, but confirmation. She knew. and now she knew that I was moving closer. I watched her car pull away from the curb and stood there for a moment in the afternoon light. Then I called the forensic accountant the moment I was back in the car. "Tell me what you have so far," I said. Her name was Drive.Chinwei. She had been working for 72 hours straight by the sound of her voice, which meant she had found something worth losing sleep over. 18 accounts, she said, spread across 4 jurisdictions. The routing is complex, but the pattern is consistent. Money entered through the veil contracts, moved through 3 intermediary structures, and exited into accounts held by a trust registered in the name of a deceased relative. "How much total?" I said. "Over the 4-year period? Approximately 63 million, she said. "Give or take what I haven't traced yet." I stood very still on the pavement. $63 million. Moved so carefully over for years that it had passed through every internal audit, without triggering a single flag. "How long to complete the full picture?" I said. 10 days, she said. "Maybe 8 if nothing gets complicated." "Make it 8, I said. "Please." I ended the call, looked up at the sky above the city for a moment, clear. The kind of afternoon that felt like it belonged to a different season. 8 days. Then I called Iris Park. She picked up on the first ring. "I've been expecting your call," she said. "The board has been buzzing since your father's gala. Several board members have already been quietly and independently asking questions about the distribution contract structures." "Good," I said. "I need to ask you something directly, Iris, and I need an honest answer." A pause. "All right. If evidence emerged of financial misconduct at the executive level," I said. "Clear, documented, forensically verified evidence. Would the board act on it regardless of who was involved?" A longer pause this time. "If the evidence was what you're describing," she said carefully, "then yes, the board would have to act." Another pause. "Are we talking about someone currently on the board?" "Not currently," I said. "Someone connected to the board," she said. It wasn't a question. "Give me 10 days, I said. "Then I'll need an emergency session." She was quiet for a moment. 10 days, she said. "I'll make sure the right people are available." I thanked her and ended the call. 8 days for the accountant, 10 for the board meeting. The gap gave me the days of room, which was not much but was enough if nothing went wrong. Things could go wrong. I was aware of that. Lena had not survived for this long by being careless, and I had just walked directly into her sight line over lunch and showed her the edge of what I knew. She was going to move. She had to. The only real question was when and in which direction she would go. I found out that evening. Dara called me at 7:15, her voice very flat and very controlled, which was how Dara sounded when something had happened that she needed me to receive calmly. "There has been a break-in," she said. "The East Wing study. Someone accessed the document safe." I was already moving toward my coat. "What was taken?" "Nothing," she said. "The safe was open, but it was empty. I moved everything 3 days ago when you told me the lunch was scheduled." A pause. I thought it was likely she would try something after a direct face-to-face conversation. Dara said it without any particular drama. I stopped, looked at the wall of the room I was standing in. "You already knew she might do this," I said. "I thought it was probable," Dara said. "So I made sure there was nothing there to find." I stood there for a moment, thinking about this woman who had measured me in my sleep and moved sensitive documents before I had even thought to ask. "Dara," I said, double quotes, "yes. You're very good at this." A short pause. "I know," she said, not with arrogance, just as a fact. "The police are here. You should come." I went. The break-in was professionally done. No broken glass, no damage. Someone who knew what they were doing and had very good information about the layout of the house, which meant Lena had resources I hadn't fully mapped yet. People on the inside who had been watching before I arrived. That was important information. I filed it. I also filed the fact that she had moved within hours of her lunch. That level of speed meant she was frightened, genuinely frightened, which meant she understood, better than I had fully realized, exactly how close we actually were to the end of this. Good. The police took a report. I was helpful and straightforward and gave them nothing useful because involving them directly at this stage was still not the right move. Dara agreed. We talked quietly in the narrow hallway once the front door had closed behind the last officer, and the house went silent again. "She has someone in the house," I said. "Had," Dara said. "I've already identified who I think it is. I'll handle it tomorrow." I looked at her. "The overnight housekeeper," she said. "He's been here for 3 years, long enough to have been placed before your return." She folded her arms. "He gave notice this morning. He submitted his formal notice before a single person in this entire house had discovered that the document safe was open." "That's confirmation," I said. "Yes," Dara said very quietly. and it's also a direct message. She knows now that we know. We stood in the hallway for a moment. The house was quiet around us. The kind of quiet that happened after something had passed through. She's going to escalate. I said. I think so too, Dara said without hesitating. The question is what specific form it takes. I thought about it, about what I would do. In her position, if I had made a move and it hadn't worked and I knew the other side was building towards something I couldn't stop through normal channels, she'll try to discredit me. I said, something that makes the financial evidence look like a personal vendetta. She'll surface something about my time in the jungle. Questions about my mental fitness. She'll move through the press first, most likely. Something designed specifically to make me look mentally unstable or unfit. Dara was quiet for a moment. That's exactly what I would do, she said. I know. I said, so we moved the timeline. How? Chunwei has 8 days. I said, tell her she has 5. Dara took a slow breath. That's very aggressive. 5 days. I said, then we take everything we have to Iris Park and the board, and we do it before Lena has time to build her counter-narrative. A pause. A long one, by Dara's standards. All right, she said. 5 days. She went to make calls. I went upstairs. I sat down on the floor next to the open window the way I always did and looked at the city lights for a long time. 5 days. It was tight. Chunwei was thorough and she worked fast. But 5 days meant she might hand us 90% of the picture instead of 100. 90% of the full picture was still enormously powerful. It simply meant more pressure on how I presented everything. I could handle pressure. I thought about Asha. About a specific afternoon when I was maybe 12 years old, somewhere in the 3rd year of understanding how she hunted. We had been tracking something for 2 days, patient and hurried. Then the thing had startled and changed directions suddenly, and everything compressed from a long, slow approach into a very fast decision. She hadn't hesitated. She had simply adjusted and moved. I had never seen her hesitate, not once. Not even when things changed. That was what I had learned from her more than anything. Not the strength, not the silence, the adjustment, the ability to change the plan completely without losing the goal. I was adjusting now. 5 days later, at 9 in the morning, Dr. Chunwei emailed me a 47-page document with 91 attached files. She had done it in 5 days. I read it twice before I sent it to Iris Park. Then I called Sable Voss. She picked up on the second ring. You have something, she said immediately. Not a question. I have everything, I said, and I need you to be ready to publish within 48 hours of receiving it. A pause. How solid is it? Forensically verified. Multiple independent chains of evidence. A named source who will give a recorded statement. I paused. It will hold. Another pause from her end. Shorter this time. Send it to me. I sent it. Then I sent the same complete package to Iris Park and to Gerald with a note asking him to review it from a legal standpoint before the emergency board session that Iris had already quietly convened for the following morning. Then I sat back and waited. The remaining hours moved slowly. At 11 that night, my phone buzzed. A number I recognized. Lena Mercer. I looked at the name on the screen for a long moment. Thought briefly about not answering at all. Then I picked up Kai. Her voice was different now. The polish was still there, but something underneath it had changed. A frequency. Like a structure that was still standing but had lost the thing that made it stable. Lena. I said. A pause. Whatever you think you found, she said. It's more complicated than it looks. There are things about your father you don't understand. Things he did that. I know what my father did. I said. He threw a 6-year-old off a cliff and left him there for 12 years. I have a complete understanding of who he was. Silence on the line. He was going to destroy everything, she said. Her voice had shifted. Something raw underneath. Everything I built. Everything I contributed for 30 years. He found the whole thing and he was going to take everything away and hand it all directly to. Her voice stopped completely. To me. I said quietly. He was going to hand it all to me. There was another silence. Longer this time. Much longer. You weren't supposed to come back, she said. And in those 5 words, finally, was the truth of it. Plain and undecorated. No performance. Just the thing she actually meant. I held the phone and said nothing. What happens now? She said. Tomorrow morning. I said. The board meets. Gerald has the documentation. Iris Park has the forensic report. And in approximately 47 hours, a journalist named Sable Voss will publish a very thorough and very accurate account of the last 4 years. The silence on the other end was absolute. I'd suggest talking to your lawyers tonight, I said. Not because I'm telling you to, just because it's the only useful thing left to do. I ended the call. I set the phone down on the windowsill. looked out at the city below. The lights, the movement, the permanent restless noise of a place that never fully stopped. I thought about the night my father's people had come to the jungle, the tranquilizer dart, Asha going down, the sudden hard weight of the world changing completely in a way I had no language for yet. I had screamed that morning, real screaming, the kind that came from a place so far down there was no thought attached to it, just pure animal loss. I had not understood then what was actually coming. I had only understood, with every cell in my body, what was being taken from me. 12 years later, sitting on a floor in a mansion that belonged to me, looking out at a city I was slowly learning the shape of, I understood something I hadn't before. What was taken that morning was also, eventually, what brought me here. To this window, to this moment, to a set of circumstances where everything my father had built and broken and hidden was now in my hands. I didn't know what to call that. I wasn't sure there was a word for it in any language I knew, but I knew what I was going to do with it. The board meeting was at 9 the next morning. I walked in at exactly 9. Not early, not late. On time. Because how you entered mattered. On time. Because I had learned that in human spaces, how you entered a room communicated everything about how you understood your own position in it. 14 people around the table. Iris Park at one end. Gerald to my left with a stack of folders. Every face in that room somewhere between grave and careful. I sat down at the head of the table. Nobody spoke for a full moment. Then I looked around the room slowly the way I always looked at rooms. The same way I had looked around the room on day 23, when I was a stranger in a suit reading Predators. Only now I knew all of their names and all of their histories, and exactly how each of them would move under pressure. Thank you for coming, I said. Let's begin. 2 hours later, it was done. The vote was unanimous. Every single person in that room, Webb voted with us. He had read the forensic report the night before and done the rapid reassessment. That smart opportunist always did. He had been handed the forensic report the night before and had apparently spent the evening doing the kind of rapid reassessment that people did. When they realized the landscape had completely changed, the physician had been right about him. He was an opportunist before anything else, and he followed power wherever it moved. Now he was following mine. Joe voted with us too. No hesitation. He even shook my hand after. I shook it back. The formal legal referral went to the relevant authorities that same afternoon. Gerald managed the whole process without being asked twice. Gerald managed the process with the quiet efficiency of a man who had been waiting for something exactly like this and was relieved it had finally arrived. Vale was contacted by investigators before the end of the day. Lena, I was told, had already begun speaking to her lawyers, which meant she had taken my advice. Good. The process would be cleaner for it. I left the building for in the afternoon and stood on the pavement outside. In the clean autumn light for a moment, Dara appeared beside me. She had been in the meeting. She had not said a word during the entire 2 hours. Just sat quietly and watched and taken notes with her pen moving fast across the page. That's it, she said. That's the beginning, I said. She looked at me sideways. Her eyebrows moved up slightly. There's more. There's always more, I said. The company needs restructuring. The contracts need auditing. 3 division heads need replacing. The foundation my father started needs someone who actually understands what it was supposed to do. I looked out at the street, and I need to learn approximately 1,000 things I still don't know. Dara was quiet for a moment. Then she made a sound that was very close to a laugh. Not quite, but close enough that I counted it. You know, she said, when I walked into your room on day 2 and found you sleeping on the floor, I genuinely didn't know if this was going to work. What changed your mind? I said. She thought about it for a full moment. You asked why I wanted to help you, she said. And instead of assuming it was about money or strategy, you just wanted to understand the actual reason. She paused. Nobody in the building had ever asked me that before. I looked at her. She was looking at the street with her arms folded, not at me. Thank you, I said, for all of it. She nodded once, short, the nod of someone who accepted things without needing them decorated. I respected that. What happens with the sanctuary eventually? Dara said after a quiet moment. The facility where they are keeping Asha. I had been thinking about this since week 1. Since before the board meeting and the gala and the lunch and all of it. Since the first night I had lain on the floor and listened to the city and felt the distance between where I was and where I had come from. I'm buying it, I said. The whole facility and expanding it and making sure it is whatever it needs for the next 30 years. Dara was quiet, and I'm going to visit her, I said, as soon as this is settled enough to leave for a few days. Another silence. The city moved around us. She might not recognize you, Dara said carefully. It's been months since they separated you. She'll recognize me, I said. I said it with the same certainty I would have said anything I knew from experience rather than theory. The same way I knew that a short meeting meant a settled plan. The same certainty I had when I knew that controlled breathing meant hidden fear and that thumb pressing meant suppressed panic. Some things you knew because you had lived them long enough that they became part of how you understood everything else. Dara nodded once. She didn't argue with it. We stood there a moment longer in the afternoon light without speaking. The afternoon light was going golden the way it did in the city in autumn, catching the glass on the buildings and turning everything briefly, quietly beautiful. Then Dara straightened, pulled out her phone. 3 calls I need to return, to meetings to reschedule, and a very aggressive journalist who has been trying to reach you since this morning. Sable Voss, I said. She says the story publishes tomorrow and she wants a comment from you directly. I considered it. Tell her I'll give her 10 minutes. Dara was already typing. Done. She glanced at me. Are you ready for what comes after? Because once this publishes, everything gets louder. I thought about the jungle, about the mornings when the whole canopy erupted at once, birds, insects, every living thing responding to something that had shifted in the world below. Loud and completely disorienting if you didn't understand what it meant. If you understood, it was only information. If you understood what it meant, it was just information. Just the world adjusting to a change that had already happened. I'm ready, I said. She nodded, walked back toward the building entrance, already on her phone, already moving to the next thing. I stayed outside for another full minute with my hands in my pockets and looked up at the sky above the city buildings. The hawk was there again, or one like it, riding a thermal in slow circles above the roofline with the absolute patience of something that understood its own place in the world completely. I watched it for a while. Then I straightened my jacket, turned around, and walked back inside. There was work to do. There was always work to do. And for the first time since I had been pulled out of the jungle, I understood exactly what I was doing and why. Not because the city had finally made sense to me, but because somewhere in the last several weeks I had stopped trying to make it into something it fundamentally wasn't. It was a different kind of terrain, different rules on the surface, different language, different rhythms, but the same underneath. The same basic laws that governed everything alive. Know your ground, know your people, know who to trust and who to watch. Move with precision. Never waste energy on performance. And when the moment comes, when everything finally clears and the path opens and the time for waiting is over, act without hesitation. Asha had taught me that in a jungle 12 years ago, with no words and no explanation. Just demonstration repeated until it lived in my body the way breathing lived in my body. I carried everything she had given me into every room I walked into. I always would. That was the one thing I was completely certain of.